BLG. Rashid, thank you for the super chat, brother. We appreciate you joining us now. Brandon Lee Gowton from Bleeding Green Nation, one of the best Eagles websites there is. Go there, check them out, and follow him on Twitter at Brandon Gowton. BLG, how you doing this Wednesday morning, brother?
Good, guys. How's it going?
Good, bud. So I assume you heard some of that. I before we get into Howie, and I want to ask your thoughts about Howie, but since we had a question about it, like, why is, I mean, I get, like, reporters in the world are not very popular right now and more than football, but like every single player talked about, hey, this passing game isn't where it needs to be. And ultimately it got where it needed to be in the biggest, on the biggest stage, and the Eagles deserve credit for it. But does that change that the entire team was talking about it? Or am I misrepresenting that, PLG?
No, I think I was just thinking about this recently, where like things kind of get changed. I think in hindsight sometimes, or the perception is it can be changed like that, or for some, as it was viewed along the way, like, oh, Jalen Hurts, like how magnanimous of him to like take a back seat to Saquon Barkley. It's like, that wasn't the case. It wasn't like, oh, he was just taking a back seat to the running game because they actually felt awesome about the passing game. They just so happened to want to run the ball a lot. No, they ran the ball a lot because they felt like that was their best way to win for like most of the season. And that doesn't mean that Jalen Hurts can't pass at all. As you said, he showed up in the biggest moments. But it did mean that the passing game had issues, and they weren't going to just. If it was that awesome, they would have relied on the passing game all year.
But let me ask you about this: does the success of the team prove that maybe that concern is far too overblown? Because they were never a great passing team last year, and ultimately they did reach the pinnacle of the sport, by doing it the way they did. They had a pass at the end, but they were able to. So, were all of our concerns during the year proven to be overrated? Even maybe the concerns of the players overrated.
If you're framing it as like, again, like, can the passing game get to a certain level, then yeah. But even like as someone who was skeptical about the passing game, I think I would come on this show and say, I think Jalen Hurts can do this. It's just a matter of needing him to see him do it. And that was before, the championship game in the Super Bowl. We just didn't see it, I think, with enough consistency. But you look at historical precedent until like where the Eagles were about like after the Rams game there, and some of the passing numbers, like that was a historically unproductive passing offense for how far the Eagles were getting into the playoffs to that point. So in that sense, I don't think the concerns were overblown. And I do think, as it portends, moving forward here for 2025, like I don't think it's all questions are answered that the passing game can be like that over the course of a season. Of course, we don't know that. Like, it was such a high level. So there is a big question of, what this offense is going to look like next season.
No, I mean, the old adage is winning cures everything, and it does, because people say, well, they won. Well, that doesn't mean that things couldn't have been better along the way, even for a team that I think Jeffrey Lurie correctly stated should be in the conversation for being one of the best ever in the modern era. There's always room for improvement, Nobody's perfect. Nobody's ever perfect in this game, as Nick will say a million times. So the thought, and I remember talking about at the bye week, the early bye week after week 4, when they scaled things back and Lane Johnson and Jordan Mailata walked into Nick Sirianni's office, and everybody knows the story, and says, hey, man, we got this superstar running back. Let's run the football. I thought it was a little bit unfair coming off that Tampa Bay game, because I thought it was not a real vision of what the Eagles looked like, because AJ was not playing in that game. Lane was not playing in that game. There was a third player. Who else? Was Devontae out? Devontae was out in that game.
Was out.
I'm like, what do you expect? And I thought it was too early to panic. And excuse me, losing my voice. In hindsight, I was wrong. They went the right direction. But at the time, I thought, well, why are you panicking? I mean, they never play well without AJ. Yeah, Devontae and Lane, they never play well without Lane. Plus, it was 1,000,000 degrees in Tampa. They weren't ready for that weather.
That game was a weather game for the opposite reason. Yeah,
I thought it was an overreaction. to be honest, early in the process. But obviously it worked out. But yeah, it's revisionism to say this team, oh, there was nothing wrong the whole time. They were trying to fix it the whole time.
I'm not saying there wasn't something wrong. I just wonder if the concerns, again, by you, by me, by BLG, by the players, by AJ Brown, maybe they were all overblown. That everybody is a prisoner of the moment at times and can say, oh, is this going to work out? But it did. So, I mean, again, I'm looking at it in hindsight now where it's 2020 vision, obviously. So I understand both sides of it. But, I just wonder if the passing yards thing is overblown overall. I mean, the quarterback threw for 2,900 yards last year. I mean, if I told you that at the beginning of the season, you would have said, what? 2,900 yards for a starting quarterback to play all their games, except 16 of their games? That's low. So maybe the whole thing is overblown.
Yeah, I don't agree with you. I think they had problems in the passing game, and I think they want to improve. And that when they kick up in the offseason, and BLG and I are going to be down there for all, they're gonna try to improve the passing. I guarantee it. That's what they're going to.
Right? I mean, every team is going to try and improve, or every player is going to try and improve. Yeah,
that's what you're supposed to do.
Just one more quick.
BLG, good. Yeah, go
just one more quick point on this before we move on. But just looking back at this article I talked about, January 23rd from the Ringer, the Philadelphia Eagles pass offense defies modern playoff history. In parentheses, it may not matter, and it didn't matter. But there's a line in here, just as recently as the divisional round win, against the Rams, Jalen Hurts finished the game. He had 65 net passing yards, and that was the lowest of any team in a playoff game in the past decade. You know what I mean? So I think there were fair conversations about it.
Yeah, I do think that's fair. I do think there's a good comment here too. Key says, if it's amazing how if something ends well, all the problems in between don't.
I know he's right. Winning the Super Bowl quiz, a brilliant comment. Better said than I say it all the time. Usually when people evaluate players, mainly quarterbacks, it breaks everybody. Like the evaluation, it's like, all right, well, you can't evaluate the player, everything that came up to it, the whole team. If you win the Super Bowl, it doesn't erase everything before. You're still trying to get better. You're still trying to improve. And nothing's ever perfect. And yeah, I remember at the time talking about that number, BLG, to your point, 65 net passing yards. How anybody could sit there. If the Eagles didn't win the Super Bowl, if Jalen Carter didn't have those 2 pass rushes, you wouldn't stop talking about it.
Yeah, that'd be our topic every single day on Bird 365. You're right. You're right about that.
Yeah. So,
all right, BLG, let me ask you, man, how he spoke yesterday. I'm not going to cloud it. Your take, your thoughts. Did anything stick out to you from Howie Roseman speaking in his pre-draft press conference yesterday at the NovaCare Complex?
Not as much as probably the post-draft press conference, maybe a little more than the pre-draft, where he's kind of reluctant to say, I think, too much of anything. Nothing groundbreaking to me, nothing earth-shattering. I do think one of the more interesting comments to me was the kind of follow-up on what I think we'd even talked about it here when I was on, about his comments about certain players that he may or may not have, on the Eagles board based on, off the field homework that they do on them and allegations. And certainly did not take as hard of a stance that he did on the podcast with, I believe it was Todd McShay at the time, and kind of couched that in more unclear terms of what that, evaluation is for them.
Yeah, you're eliminating, unfortunately, too many players if you're doing that. He did have to scale that back. I'm not surprised. Mike Sealski kind of pressed him on that, and they started. And it's very difficult to talk about because, where do you, people can make accusations. They could be untrue. Yeah. And then sort of ultimately how he leaned on the judicial process, which I don't know how you can do it any other way. Maybe, but even there's some context there if somebody's on video and it's obvious. But I think those situations take care of themselves, don't they? This is one of those things where I bet if Howie could go back, he would just try to do it more politically and say it's a case-by-case situation. Bring up Dom, best in the business. He did bring up Dom, something like that. I think he tried to scale back to that position. I'm not sure if it was successful though. I haven't seen if Mike has written about it. I assume he will. I don't think it's going to be favorable because he kind of hemmed and hawed.
Well, also just, like the question comes too from, we all know that's not true. Like just based on their actions.
Well, yeah, exactly.
We know that's not a deal breaker for them.
that
So yeah, you can't like lie to us, and not just us, the media, but like everyone, and like expect, not to be asked about that. So, and I don't think Howie was trying to lie, but I don't know what his intent was, but it's just obviously it's not personal. It's just not consistent from what we've seen with his actions.
No, it's never consistent. That's unfortunately yet. How can it be consistent? I always bring up the Jimmy Johnson quote because I loved it. It was about the kid who fell asleep. It was a running back. I always forget his name. He fell asleep in a meeting and he cut him. And somebody asked him, "Would you cut Emmitt Smith?" And he's like, and he said, "Look, I'm going to treat everybody fairly. That doesn't mean I'm going to treat them the same. Superstars get deference."
Right.
I think we all know that. We're not children. And the same thing with the NFL. The more talent that you have, the more chances you're going to get. That's just the reality of the situation. From me, BLG, the most interesting parts were Howie kind of explaining the top 30 visits. I thought that was interesting because in recent years, they've drafted a lot of guys they brought in on top 30 visits. And I don't know about you, but you've been here longer than me. I didn't pay much attention to them, and I started paying attention to them the past few years because they keep drafting guys they bring in. And I don't know if that was always the case. I don't think it was. And Howie talked about some shift in the top. I think there has been a shift because they keep drafting guys that they bring in. So do you pay closer attention to those things now?
Yeah, I think it was like 2014, so a little over 10 years ago now, that Howie did publicly say that like they used them for subterfuge, as was brought up in the press conference to him. But I don't really think that actually has been the case for the most part. I mean, there might be a couple in there that are like that, and a couple of them are always going to be like, there's going to be a prospect who has serious kind of medical questions and or character questions that they might not have like a ton of interest in drafting that player, but they simply just need more information on that guy. Or, it's a school where they're like connections, Big Dom's connections, whoever, they're just not as good. So they have to get him in person to kind of get some more questions answered. So there might be some of those visits in there for just genuinely gathering more information on a player that they may not even love, but just don't even know enough about off the field. But I think by and large, those visits are very valuable to them. And it's not even just who they draft that year. It's who they circle back to years later down the road for free agency or whatever. So I absolutely do think they put a ton of value in those. And I think that makes a lot of sense. I do think, people have been like, well, it's crazy. Like the Rams and now the Jaguars, I guess, they don't do that.
Yeah, they don't even do them. Yeah.
I would lean towards doing it because you want that information. At the same time, I think you can argue there would be a downside of maybe like you're putting too much bias, emphasis on putting, if you meet someone in person, then you kind of like you become enamored with that and you lose some of the objectivity. Maybe that's what the Rams think. But for the Eagles, it seems to be working out pretty well where they bring these guys in and then they feel good about having the information on them.
Yeah, the Rams are crazy, by the way. I brought that up to Zander. It's like they don't go to the combine.
They don't do anything.
They don't do top 30 visits, and they got the defensive rookie of the year. It's in third place. The Eagles had second place and fourth place. It's like they're the only team drafting better than the Eagles, and they don't do any of it.
I guess there's more than one ways to do things, as people say, and that's clear proof right there. But the Rams have been drafting exceptionally well, so it is interesting. BLG, let me ask you for the Eagles draft. We're 8 days away, brother, from round one. I can't believe it's already here. 9 days away from round 2 and 3, which I think is going to be a bigger day for the Birds. But what's your dream scenario for the Eagles in this draft? And then conversely, what is your nightmare scenario that could unfold for the Eagles in this draft?
Yeah, I think dream is like Walter Nolan somehow falls to 32 there, which doesn't seem impossible. Certainly if Kunal Mitchell can fall to 22 last year, I don't see why Walter Nolan can't fall a little bit there.
Right.
But in a draft class where the talent doesn't seem to be like amazing across the board, that feels like a guy like worth taking a chance on. And to pair him, and if he can hit his potential, you pair him next to Jalen Carter, and that's your Milton Williams replacement. Like I feel pretty good about that. Adding him to the
Yeah.
defensive tackle rotation. Um, Worst case scenario, I would say they kind of maybe just get boxed into the pick there at 32. Like no one wants to come up. They don't move up, and then you end up taking not like maybe actual Marcus Smith from 2014. Sorry, Marcus Smith.
Oh
But
man.
they kind of like they're reaching a little bit there for a player that really might go more so in the middle of the second round or something
Yeah,
like that
right.
ideally, but they kind of they can't move because again it's a draft class where it's not perceived to be like, oh, we have to go up and get players, and maybe it becomes a position where they're not getting great offers to move down, so maybe they just get kind of stuck and have to make a pick.
Yeah, right. One follow up there on your dream scenario with Walter Nolan, because me and you are on the same page. I really like that player. I think he'd be great here in Philly. What do you think that would mean for Jordan Davis's future in Philly? Do you think it would simply be Walter's here to replace Nolan, or would it be we got a more versatile defensive tackle and we're going to move on from Jordan Davis? How do you see that unfolding if they did go down the Walter Nolan route?
Yeah, I think that's independent of that, I guess. But and we'll see here because Eagles only have until like May 2nd, I believe, to pick up that 5th-year option for Jordan Davis for the 2026 season. I really don't know what they're gonna do with that because it feels I kind of lean towards I think they're gonna do it, but I think they shouldn't do it. So I think that's kind of a tough one to suss out still here, and maybe I don't know, maybe it's one still they're thinking about, and maybe the draft would impact their plan on that again, since they have until after the draft to do it. So they could wait if they really wanted to and see how that works, and then let Jordan Davis play out the final year of his deal. But I don't know that they're ready to give up on Jordan Davis.
No, and I Vic wants a nose tackle. So ultimately, I think, and part of the reason the Eagles are in this conundrum is they probably took Jordan Davis a little bit too high for the position he plays. And this is a draft that is supposed to be deep with nose tackles. So if they get a nose tackle in the second round or the third round, I think that will tell you more than a player like Walter Nolan, because they're essentially playing different positions. But secondary is what's interesting me the most, BLG. I mean, they seem to be hitting the secondary hard with these pre-draft visits, especially late. And that surprises me. I didn't see that coming. Like, I'm like, where's the tight ends? And now it's pretty high level people and Starks and Trey Amos and Maxwell Harrison, bunch of nickel slots for later in the process. That makes some sense because they need a backup.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as the top level guys, does that tell you anything? They did not have as much confidence in Kaylee Ringo and Sidney Brown as they profess to have at times?
I think that's a fair way to frame it. I also think it could just be that cornerback might be like a range that really fits into where they are at 32 there, right around there, where like that could be the best player available. I've seen, opinions differ here, but like someone like Trey Amos, who they brought in, like I think that guy or Maxwell Hairston, like they might conceivably like be the best player around that spot. And if they're head and shoulders above a different position, like kind of happen, they might have to take that guy, and then play it out there, and not just assume that Keely Ringo is going to step up. Even if Keely does, that's great. That's a good problem to have in that case. That your first round pick ideally they're playing, but if it's because Keely is looking really good, then you live with that. So that is interesting. I think it's just because you would think cornerback so young, they have talent there. They don't need, and I don't think they need to address that position. They also add Adoree Jackson in the mix, but I mean you do lose Darius Slay, you did lose Isaiah Rodgers, so there are snaps there to be taken. And for as much as we all think Keely Ringo might be able to make the jump, it's not like a certainty yet. So I guess that explains that.
Good stuff, BLG, on the draft here coming up. 8 days out, brother, and it's I don't know if you've consumed any mock drafts or anything, but it's really the most interesting part of this draft to me is everybody's mocked everywhere. Like I've seen Walter Nolan top 10, I've seen him round 2. I've seen Malachi Starks top 15, I've seen him round 2. I mean, all of these dudes. So it's going to be interesting to see how the board falls, and obviously that's going to dictate what the Eagles are going to do. But I guess ideal scenario we already talked about, but what's the position group that this team needs to address? Obviously, Goddard's out there. You lost a bunch of guys on defense. That's why I've kind of ruled out safety. Not that I don't like the player. I actually really like Malachi Starks, but I have a hard time believing they would draft a safety with all of the expensive needs that they have around them. Is that how you see it here with the draft?
Yeah, I agree. I'm not saying they won't draft him again, especially if someone like Malachi Starks is just head and shoulders above other players there. Then you do that, but I have to lean into the trenches. That's what the Eagles do, and I think they're gonna. That just seems like a very safe bet, and they've been wanting to draft a Lane Johnson successor for years now, and that's not to say that because we don't know how long Lane's going to play, and obviously he signed his contract extension, but I don't think they've just moved off of that all of a sudden as he's getting older.
No.
And I don't think they're going to draft like a right tackle only in the first round, but they might draft someone early on who they think might be able to move to the outside, like Gray Zabel, for example, in the future, who also maybe might be able to play at right guard and be your Mekhi Becton replacement in the short term. So I kind of look at my mind's still on that as a realistic possibility. Edge rusher obviously is another big one there, just given the there's a lot of uncertainty at that position. We're talking about that being the case for cornerback. Yeah. Nolan had an awesome end of the season last year, but you still need to see a little bit more in terms of the consistency going into his third year. Can he pick up where he left off? Jalen Hunt, obviously, same kind of thing. Even less material, less film on tape there to be a proven commodity. So to be able to add someone there, and then obviously Bryce Huff, who as I've said, I just don't think Vic Fangio wants to play that guy. I think you definitely need to add more at that spot.
So if we talk about I'll give you my 3, and then I'll ask you your 3. So I'm going edge rusher, and I'm going Nick Scorton. I'm going offensive line, as you kind of talked about, this sort of heir apparent to Lane Johnson. Started right guard, moved out to right tackle. I'm going Donovan Jackson. I don't know if he could move out to right tackle, but he played left tackle at Ohio State. He did pretty well when Josh Simmons got hurt. So maybe. And then what am I missing? What did I forget?
Safety.
We'll say defensive back.
Okay.
I'm going to go Trey Amos. So your 3 favorites in that grouping.
Yeah, I think I would rank how you did there, especially with position versatility being a big factor. Scorton's really interesting.
I want the size, BLG. They have no size on the edge whatsoever. None.
They don't. That's why, I can't, James Pierce Jr. I can't see that. I can't see Vic loving that kind of. I know he gets, he had production, and maybe he'll go somewhere and be great. But I have a tough time seeing that. And again, specifically because of the size. Now
he produced though, man.
He did, but I just look at pictures of that guy, and I'm like, this guy looks like a defensive back.
I know. But see, BLG, sometimes I struggle with that because somebody jumps out of the gym within the underwear Olympics, and everyone's like, "Oh, take him," but he had no production. I'm like, well, what matters more, production on the football field or running around with nobody out there? So I struggle with that at draft time.
So does the NFL. That's the trick. It's hard to. You can look at what people have done, but that's the big trick is what they will do. Projection. Projection is the name of the game, and it is. There's no perfect art to it. It's not oh, this guy was productive in college, therefore he will be productive in the NFL. Oh, this guy is athletic, so therefore it translates. There's no magic bullet. There's obviously things that you can look at to increase your chances of hitting, but there's so much that just personality is a big factor. But yeah, getting back to Skurton there, I think that's a name that makes sense. speaking of adding some size, to the edge rusher position, you do that. He's also only 20 years old. Like, that's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
I'm intrigued by the profile there.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. I've been talking, but to me, to go into a season where, and remember, Nolan's coming off a torn tricep, so I'm like, what does that do? It's like, is he going to be able at his size to hold up against those monsters on the edge for? In the Eagles' case, you're hoping to play 20, 21 games every year. I don't know how that. Now, Jelix Hunt, I think, has the brain to add some weight.
Yes.
But he's got to do it. We got to see it first. And then Azeez Ojulari's undersized. Josh Uche's undersized. I mean, somebody's got to have some ability to set the edge on a consistent basis. So I'm a little concerned about the size issue out there, and I think Scorton would be a fit. Tight end, Dallas Goedert's probably the only, and I'll end it there. Make sure you follow BLG at Brandon Gowton on the X platform. Read him at bleedinggreennation.com. Always say one-stop shop to get all your Eagles news every morning. Make sure you go there with BLG and the staff. It's one player how we kind of talked about. They haven't looked at tight ends. Here's where the subterfuge comes in it for me. I don't know, but I can't believe the Eagles aren't heavily invested in the tight end position. Howie said he draft-proofed with Harrison Bryant and Kylan Granson. It's just not good enough. Grant Calcaterra. Now, maybe you work things out with Dallas Goedert. Then you're better at tight end. That's what's so interesting to me. If you get Dallas Goedert back just for a year, you're better because Granson or Bryant are better third-string tight ends than E.J. Jenkins or whatever they were trying to get through last year. But if you don't have Dallas, it all falls apart. And then Grant's number one and they're number two. It's just that would be a deficiency on a team that hasn't had many deficiencies.
Yeah, I think they seem to be looking at it as like they've been able to have some success without Dallas Goedert during those stretches that he's missed.
Can I interrupt, though?
Sure.
Real quick. And I've been saying this for the past 2 days. They won with everybody. Like, nobody's saying Fred Johnson.
Exactly.
They won 16 of 17 games. Nobody's saying Fred Johnson. Well, we persevered, so we don't need Jordan Mailata, like everybody knows.
Exactly. Yep.
So that's why I don't buy the Well, we won with Calcaterra.
I totally agree with that. And, you look at how good they were in the playoffs. And Goddard came back, and he was excellent in the playoffs. He was really, really good. And a huge reason they won that Packers game, the first game. So, I'm underwhelmed so far with, what their replacement options would be. We'll see what happens in the draft. I just think that's not really a really surefire way of adding something reliable to the tight end position. Rookie tight ends are just not a given. There's ones that hit, sure, that's great. Sam Laporta, Brock Bowers last year, obviously a different kind of caliber of what the Eagles are going to be able to get. I would still think they would almost need to trade for someone like Michael Mayer. That's they need to make a move for someone who might have a little bit more. Sell me on something, basically. Give me something I can at least kind of squint and see it a little bit. You can't even see that right now. There's nothing here that makes you go, oh yeah, this might work out pretty well. This might not be that big of a deal. Oh no, it's a really big deal. Not only as a pass catcher, but I think his run blocking ability too. They don't have anyone on the team, I think, who's a good run blocker right now at tight end.
Well, I'll try to sell you on something. 4th round, they don't even have a 4th round pick. So 5th round, Mitchell Evans, just pure blocker. And just say, you know what? We're going to run the ball. All right, screw it. He can catch it if it goes his way, but just go that way. Because they need, to your point, they need a run blocker. They need especially if you're going to try to run for 2,000 yards again. So just draft Mitchell Evans in the 5th round if he's there. I'd rather have that than Grant Calcaterra. I don't see you're thrilled with it, but
well, I mean, I don't think Howie will be. I'm for it. I don't think Howie will be for it. I think he'll be I can just get my new Jack Stoll and undrafted free agency.
Well, that's true too.
Yeah.
Right.
But you got to play. But I don't know if Jack can handle that kind of like. I think Mitchell Evans is going to be a legitimate NFL tight end. I'm not sure. I like your, but interestingly, they're both from Notre Dame. Michael Mayer. If they could get him, I think that would be a very good fit. I think that could be your answer because he's a high level prospect. Yeah, I don't know why Las Vegas went back to back with tight ends, or why they can't play 12 personnel. Like, I don't know why they're trying to trade him, or if they are, why would they trade him? I don't know.
Maybe they won't. Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah.
BLJ, thank you so much for joining, brother. We appreciate it. As always, 8 days away, man, from the NFL draft. If we talk a week from now, we'll be 1 day out from the NFL draft. So we're getting close, brother. We appreciate you doing it today, and we'll talk to you again next week. All right.
Sounds good. See you guys.
Thanks, BLG.
There's BLG joining us here on Birds 365. Great stuff from BLG as always. Thought we had two great stuff from both of our guests today, Mike Gill